Hello there and welcome to this edition of Inside Syria. I'm Laura Kyle. Outgoing UN Arab League Special Envoy to Syria, Kofi Annan, has called his job mission impossible. So what hope is there that his replacement, Lakhdar Brahimi, can succeed in bringing an end to the violence in Syria? Well, the UN admits that both sides appear to be set on war, yet the Algerian diplomat believes every conflict does have a solution. We'll be looking closely at the enormous challenges facing Brahimi in just a moment. First, this report from Scott Heidler in New York.
This is the man whose job it is to find a way to end the killing in Syria. A difficult task, and it took a bit of convincing for Lakhdar Brahimi to come out of retirement.
So first we have to say that he's very courageous to accept his job, which is nearly an impossible mission. The idea is to have somebody who could be able, really to relaunch a negotiation if there is any prospect of a negotiation. But obviously, for the moment, the two sides have decided to fight.
Back in March, Brahimi's predecessor, Kofi Annan, brokered a ceasefire and a six-point plan to lead to peace talks. The ceasefire never took hold, and 2 weeks ago, Annan resigned, saying continued fighting and lack of unity in the Security Council prevented him from getting his job done. Lakhdar Brahimi is embracing the challenge, but he has already warned that there's little he can achieve without unity from the UN Security Council.
I suppose I am vain enough to think that with the little experience I have, if I am asked to try and do something in a situation like this, I cannot say no, even if I am deeply, deeply aware of the difficulty I'll be facing.
Brahimi is used to being flown into trouble zones to mediate. The Algerian represented his country's independence movement overseas before joining the Arab League in the 1980s, when he brokered an end to the civil war in Lebanon. In 2001, he became then UN Chief Kofi Annan's special representative, speaking on behalf of the agency at the height of the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. But his reputation for being blunt put him at odds with the U.S. government. After his retirement in 2005, Brahimi became a member of the Elders, a group of former world leaders working for global peace that includes Nelson Mandela. Since then, he has quietly been called upon for his skills and expertise. But at the age of 78, bringing a political solution to Syria could be his biggest challenge yet. With no political process, it's unclear what he can do to succeed where Annan failed. Kofi Annan warned that his job was made near impossible. He felt as though he wanted peace more than the protagonists, the Security Council, and the international community. Lakhdar Brahimi has already called for unity. Without it, a political process is a distant hope. Scott Heidler, Al Jazeera, the United Nations.
Well, today we're joined by our guests from Washington, D.C., Hussein Ibish, a regular contributor to Foreign Policy magazine, to The Atlantic, and to Al Hayat. In Moscow, we have Vyacheslav Matuzov, a former Russian diplomat and chairman of the Russian Friendship Society with Arab countries. And here in Doha, Mahjoub Zawahiri, professor of modern and contemporary history at the Middle East at Qatar University. Gentlemen, thank you all very much for joining us here on Al Jazeera today. I want to look at the difficulty of the Syria envoy job in just a moment. But first, Brahimi as a man of choice, Vyacheslav Matuzov, what does Russia think of this selection?
Well, I agree that it is impossible to imagine how Mr. Brahimi will continue his job, his duties. He obliged to do this job. So I think that Brahimi has a very good background, political background, to continue that job that began Kofi Annan. And in continuation of this mission, it's very important because Kofi Annan made a certain basic principles, 6 principles that were laid down on his mission should be preserved and to be ruling the mission of Lakhdar Brahimi. So I can say that Lakhdar Brahimi has experience in Lebanon when he was involved in solving a Lebanese crisis, a very hot civil war between factions, 15 years of war. Contradictions were great, approximately impossible, but he found out the real solution, and all sides of a Lebanese crisis agreed with this, and now we can register that Lebanon is a prosperous country that can be given as an example for other states in this region. I think that we have as a right person in right moment in Syria to fulfill this very difficult but not impossible task.
Hussein Ibish, I can see you perhaps don't quite agree with that. You don't think Brahimi is the right man to make
it was hilarious. No, that was just that's fine. I respect Lakhdar Brahimi, and I don't see who would be better. But that account of the end of the Lebanese civil war and the present situation in Lebanon was hilarious. I mean, it made me laugh uncontrollably, and because it was so ridiculous. That is not how the Lebanese civil war ended. It's not necessary to go back and do a whole explanation about the role of the war in Iraq in 1990-91 and what happened at Taif and what hasn't happened in Lebanon, the ongoing problems in Lebanon. It was funny. And there's now to talk about Lakhdar Brahimi. I mean, he's a fine man, and I think we had a pretty decent summary of his career from your correspondent and from our friend in Russia, and it's all true. But the problem is that there isn't any interest on the part of the regime in particular, and because of that, on the part of the various opposition groups in Syria, in actually having a negotiation. The Syrian regime isn't in the least bit interested in a negotiated agreement. They have a narrative that they have held to from the beginning of this conflict, which is that they are facing a foreign terrorist menace which must be crushed. And in the meanwhile, they will engage in whatever reforms, in quotes, that they feel are appropriate. Now, that is not the basis for any kind of negotiation. So you can have 6 points or 12 points or 350 million points or any number of points you want. This is, as Annan said, mission impossible. He should have seen it right away. And I think Mr. Brahimi also is going to be facing mission impossible until the situation on the ground changes such that elements of the power structure close to the regime in Damascus change their calculation and realize it's time to make a deal. It's time to get rid of the top layer of the leadership and try and make a deal. Now, at that point, would the opposition be interested in an agreement? I don't know. But right now, this is all a kabuki show and a charade. And what it serves to do is to buy time for the regime in Damascus, its friends in Russia who want to continue with the regime in Damascus, and unfortunately for some governments that don't want to act now, including the United States, which is having an election which is about domestic issues and isn't that interested in any major foreign policy.
Okay, Hussein, you raised a number of issues in that answer there. I just want to bring in Matthew Bzweri at this point because we do clearly have two opposing opinions going on here. What do you think of the man Brahimi, and has he been handed a mission impossible?
Let's put things in a context. Al-Brahimi is accepting this job after the failure of the two main tasks done by the Arab League envoy Dabi and also by Annan. And this is basically confirmed that there is a failure of diplomacy on the level of international community to handle the Syrian crisis. This is very important point. The second point I want to make also is that Lakhdar Brahimi is coming to the job after the number of casualties in Syria, and this is wide condemning of the governmental behavior against its own people, and this is ethically put a lot of impact on Lakhdar Brahimi mission and his job. The third point, Lakhdar Brahimi accepting this job without knowing exactly what is his mandate. He's traveling to New York sometime soon. He wants to know what is actually what is his mandate and he expecting there is a lot of restriction on his mandate. One of the interesting points here is that all of the parts, and here I speak about Russia, China, the United States, Western powers, and regional countries, they have a strong interest to see Lakhdar Brahimi accepting the job, but with different motivations. Russia wants this because basically they want to make sure that the whole issue handled by Security Council. The United States and the Western powers wanted Lakhdar Brahimi because they want a witness on what is happening in Syria, and they want a diplomat who may lead the transitional period, which basically this is their main interest. So basically different motivations, different interests, but they agree on the point that they need an envoy.
Okay.
So,
let's just let Matuzov respond to that. Russia only wanting Brahimi in place because they want this issue handled by the Security Council. Is that true?
Well, I can remind you about last letter sent by Kofi Annan to Security Council about his mission. He wrote down that on his conclusion after finishing his mission, that the positive result for settling Syrian crisis depends on American and Russian agreement. He didn't mention local players, Syrian players, regional players. He named personally Russia and the United States. And I can say that Russia is ready to accelerate mission of Brahimi, to influence on Syrian government with all its forces. And the yesterday interview of Mr. Sergei Lavrov showed absolutely clear readiness to make everything possible to bring peace into Syria. But we don't feel that the United States share our position. They till now accelerating military solution of this crisis, not peaceful, not political solution. That's difference, big difference, because if you are accelerating military coup d'etat, military uprising, military action against government, supporting opposition militarized forces with weaponry, with finance, with everything, you cannot bring peace. We cannot give any framework for Lakhdar Brahimi, because he can work only basing on agreement surrounding Syria countries, that all countries, Turkey, Lebanon, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar will work together and in unified form. If it will be splitted, outside players, no inside players can achieve results, because the play depends on outside influence on Syrian.
Hussein Ibish, give you a chance to jump in here if you choose.
Thank you.
You know
I do indeed.
Okay, just jump in.
I think to listen to charges coming from Russians against Americans for providing military arms to one of the sides in Syria and for promoting war and promoting a violent solution is the most hypocritical thing I've heard in many, many months. It's the height of hypocrisy. I mean, how dare you, sir? You're insulting our intelligence, and it's incredible. Russia has been supplying very sophisticated heavy weaponry to the regime in Damascus. It continues to supply heavy weaponry. It continues to maintain forces in Tartus and elsewhere in Syria. And the United States actually, I think, has been tardy in helping the opposition to become the kind of force that can actually confront the regime in a way that changes the balance of power in Syria so that a political solution becomes possible. I mean, anyone with any sense whatsoever understands that as long as the regime thinks that it can militarily defeat the opposition, which is what it has thought until now, and it thinks it still can, and it thinks that it's going to be in that position until at least spring when they'll recalculate, doesn't understand the dynamics here. All right, it is not, I think, reasonable to suggest that you can take the equation on the ground that exists in Syria and have that serve as a basis of negotiations between the regime and the opposition. And to be absolutely honest with you, let's cut through all the nonsense, right? I mean, the reason that you hear this rhetoric from official and unofficial Russian spokespeople is that they love the regime in Damascus. They don't care how many Syrians get massacred. They don't care about children being shot in the streets. They don't care about any of that. They want to preserve their military alliance, their financial relationship, their port, their warm water port in Tartus. They have interests, and they don't care what price is paid by Syrians for that. On the other hand, the Western powers, and particularly I would say the United States, And I do respect President Obama and Secretary Clinton, but we are engaged in an election here about an economy, and we don't want to deal with any major foreign policy issues until after that election, including Syria, but also Iran and Israel and Palestine and even the Eurozone. It's really, this is a domestic situation. So please spare us the hypocrisy from Moscow. Please spare us.
Okay, Matrib Zaweri, Kofi Annan resigned 2 weeks ago, blaming a lack of unity amongst United Nations Security Council countries. You can see on this show today that those diversions still exist. It's clearly the most crucial mission here to present a united international front when looking at Syria. But is Brahimi well placed to bring that unity that needs to exist?
I don't think so. Simply, Syria, Syria is becoming the center of reshaping the Middle East. Syria to the Russian is the important battle today. And in the time where we see how much the Western powers and led by the United States are weak, are not united, having lack of, not only lack of unity, even lack of political discourse to define what's happening in Syria. Let's remember that in months ago, the United States, European powers, they were not agreed to intervene in the Syrian crisis. They were witnessing all of this number of killers without having any even statements condemning what's happening in Syria. So again, it's not only blaming the lack of unity and the role of Russia. It's also again the level of hypocrisy on the Western powers when it comes to Syria. And here it's very clear to any observer that it is because of the geopolitics of Syria. No one interested in the United States, in the European powers, to have this crisis finished with quickly and having I would say a new regime in Syria. They wanted sort of assurances on different matters. They want assurances on the security of Israel. They want assurance on the chemical weapons. They want assurance with that, but no one wants assurance on the on Syrian people and how no one cares of how many people killed every day. And I think Lakhdar Brahimi, his problem not only just bringing those powers together, is actually creating a one discourse which can spread it about how much is disastrous what's happening in Syria and how much is needed that international community come together and agree on the point that this thing should stop immediately, and they have to move on to the second step with a political process where they can bring a new political regime in Syria which at least secure or stop the insecurity and instability in the region. And as long as this kind of discourse has not been created, I'm really worried about the whole mission of Lakhdar Brahimi and how much the challenge he will face.
Absolutely. It seems that there is no disagreement on that point. It's worth mentioning at this point that Brahimi is taking over from Kofi Annan just one day after the UN Security Council ordered its UN observers out of Syria. Members of the UN team based in Homs have been making their way to Damascus from where they will leave the country. The 15-member Security Council decided not to renew their mandate, which ends on Sunday. The UN, you'll remember, originally sent 300 unarmed military observers to Syria in April, but escalating violence has made their job increasingly dangerous. The UN said it wants the mission to be replaced by a liaison office in Syria to support any future peace efforts. Mr. Matuzov, it's clear, isn't it, that Kofi Annan's six-point plan is dead in the water. You say you want Brahimi to build on it, but it no longer exists. There is no ceasefire to monitor. The UN monitors are leaving the country. Now we need a fresh approach.
It is a very pity that international monitors finished their mission in Syria, because their role were very positive. We had real sources for information, what is going on the ground. Now we lost this opportunity. We have some press, media information, but it is not can be used for politicians to make a very important political decision, especially in Security Council of the United Nations. Security Council should have their own sources of information, what is going on in Syria. And I think that that Lakhdar Brahimi have this opportunity to provide great powers, to provide Security Council members all information available. I think that all accusation Russia about weaponry to send, Lavrov yesterday said that no new agreements with weaponry was made between Russia and Syria, because all weaponry that have Syria today at its disposal sent during June War 1967, during October War 1973, during Israeli invasion to Israel to Lebanon in 1982-85.
Okay.
So,
I just want to pick up on that because reportedly the Vice President of Syria is in.
For outside
why then are we seeing envoys from the Syrian, the Assad government in Russia? We've reportedly got the Vice President of Syria in Moscow today. What's he doing there?
He is not Vice President, he is Vice Prime Minister. He is Jamil Qadri Jamil, who is coming. He is one representative of one of opposition leaders. By the way, he is not a Ba'ath party activist. He was fighting regime from inside 30 years. At least. I know Jamal Qadri 30 years approximately. I know his position very well. He was against domination of Ba'ath party as a communist leader, one of the communist leaders of
what's
Syria,
he doing in Russia? If I can just jump in, because we're coming to the end of the program.
Now he's Vice Prime Minister. He is coming to solve. His responsibility is for economical sector of political life in Syria. So I think he will come here to solve economical issues, economical ties, humanitarian support to Syrian people, because Syria now starving. Syria now is coming through
Hussein
very
Ibish, I just want to
difficult
keep moving
situation.
forward, because we are moving to the end of the program. There's one issue I want to address. Brahimi, in an essay he wrote, The 7 Deadly Sins for Mediators, points out that one must be seen to be impartial. But do you think this is a man that the Assad regime can see as impartial?
Do you mean Brahimi?
Indeed, yes.
Oh, yeah, I think they love it. I don't think they care who the envoy is, as long as there's an envoy. Because as long as there's a diplomatic process, it buys them time. It buys them time from any further international efforts to essentially answer their unmitigated aggression against their own people, and to essentially redefine the balance of power in Syria so that a negotiation could be possible, or so that the regime falls, so that the killing stops, because otherwise it's just going to keep on forever. So they actually get a lot out of the diplomatic game, the Kabuki show at the UN, which is not an argument for not having observers, and it's not an argument for not having an envoy. It's just to say that please don't expect that envoy to be successful under the present circumstances, because nobody could be. And by the way, one quick point. I mean, this nonsense about Russia not having new weapons agreements with Syria. Listen, we've been hearing that for over a year. They said that a year ago. And we still see weapons shipments coming from St. Petersburg, ammunition, helicopters, fighter jets. This is and to go back to 67 and 73. Please stop lying to us. You're lying. That is what is called in English. We have a word for that in English. It's a lie.
Not lying. You are falsificating
yes, it is.
all information. You are falsificating the real situation. I'm sorry.
Okay, and,
sure. Of course.
And gentlemen, there, I'm afraid we do have to leave it. Apologies, we have run out of time, as ever. Never enough time to fully discuss all the issues on the table. But thank you very much for taking the time to be with us today. In Washington, D.C., we have Hussein Ibish, in Moscow, Vyacheslav Matuzov, and here in Doha, Majoub Zaweri. And thank you, too, for watching. Of course, Al Jazeera's coverage of the situation in Syria continues around the clock. We've also got plenty of background and analysis on our website. That's al-jazeera.com. There, too, you can watch this programme again. For now, though, that's all from me and the team. Do join us again next week for another look inside Syria. Bye for now.